Alright guys, in this episode of Armies of Arda, I'll be showcasing my Dwarves of Belegost army before expanding it by adding in some rangers. But first, the intro. So, first things third, a wee history lesson on the Dwarves of Belegost. The Dwarves of Belegost were one of the two houses of dwarves who awoke in the Blue Mountains. These two houses, who are known as the Broadbeams and the Firebeards, went on to found Belegost and Nogrod respectively. The reason I went on to choose Belegost over Nogrod was that the Dwarves of Belegost had better relations with the elves and traded with them considerably. They dug the Thousand Caves of Menegroth for King Thingol and even fought with the Union of Maedhros in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. This is in stark contrast to Nogrod, who eventually went to war with the elves. The Nerd of the Rings does a much better video than I ever could on the topic, so I will link that just in the description below if you want to go into a bit more depth. So now onto my army. I will be using the Khazad list from the Lord of the Rings book so I can incorporate all the old models I have from 15 years ago playing the game when I was a kid. You'll have to excuse my terrible camera work as I'm filming on an old crappy phone and I don't have a professional camera, so I do apologise in advance for that. Let's start with my rank and file troops. Here we have over 20 dwarfs with shield. 8 are the new plastic range, which is fantastic, but the rest are the old metal dwarfs. The old metal dwarfs are fantastic, however there were only ever 6 different poses, 3 of them being archers. I really wish Games Workshop had done a couple more for the shielded and two-handed options back in the past, but you know, we have to work with what we've got. Next for the rank and file are around 10 two-handed warriors and about 15 archers. This plus the shielded ones will be the core of my army. I went for a purple and yellow as they are kind of contrasting colours on the colour wheel, and I thought the combination was very striking. So let's move on to the elite troops. I've got 16 Khazad Guard. They do have a standard in there, and I know this isn't an option in the army book, but the axe broke off years ago and I lost it, so I converted them into a standard bearer. These are backed up by 8 Iron Guard and 2 Vault Warden teams. These were Games Workshop's new resin, and oh my god, it nearly killed me building them. I cannot stand that stuff. I would prefer the old metal any day of the week. Of course, no dwarf army is complete without some artillery, so I'll have a wee bolt thrower thrown into the mix, maybe get a second one in the future. Next, the commanders of the force. I have a few captains, standards and a musician. There's also a King's Champion, which I had to make an angry ginger man because it just looks the part. I realised I'd made a mistake here with just going for the 2 contrasting colours, as I hadn't taken like the cloaks into consideration. I ended up going for a green cloak as I could fit that into a triatic colour combination without having to repaint everything. The shield bearer is painted up differently as I wanted him to stick out and hopefully draw attacks with his high defence. The 2 converted standard bearers were made from a Khazad Guard with a broken axe, as I said earlier. The other one was a duplicate old Balin model. I know the words on the banners are authentic Khazad-Dum, as I spent hours researching what I was going to write on them, but unfortunately I didn't write it down and I can't remember for the life of me what it says. So if anybody can translate it for me, please let me know.
You still read ancient Dwarvish, do you not?
No, what is this pish? Next up are my 5 kings, which are all painted up differently and fancy to stand out. I don't know why I have a duplicate of one. I will maybe convert him into something later. Finally are my 2 named heroes. So I've got Azaghal, who's the leader of Belegost. He was an absolute weapon. In his dying breath, he wounded the great dragon Glaurung in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. This allowed all the dwarfs to escape from the field as the orcs were too scared to attack them. I felt the old incredible Dane model worked really well for this, so I've Not even converted it, just painted it up as it was, because most people know Dane now is Belegost.
In the jumble where all the jobbies go.
The other named hero is Telkar. Some of you may know he is from Nogrod, not Belegost, but I wanted to bring him into my army as he forged Narsil. I will eventually do a Nogrod army, and he will be a part of it. Now, on to the task at hand, adding some rangers to this army. You may be asking, why in God's green Middle-earth do you need any more dwarf figures for this army? But, you know, win in Belegost, as they say. But in all seriousness, I just kind of wanted it to kind of fit in with the lore, some guys out protecting the trade routes, or scouting ahead of my army when I play a battle. And more importantly, if Games Workshop ever bring back War of the Ring, I'm ready. I will be absolutely ready with 2,500 points of dwarves. So all I've done here is given them a quick bit of sand on the base, then a base coat with the black undercoat spray, and then gave the base a quick covering of Rhinox hide to get them started. So you'll notice in the coming tutorial, I am all about getting miniatures on the table painted fast. I'm not a fan of using non-painted miniatures myself. There's absolutely nothing wrong with playing with figures that aren't painted, but my personal preference is to have all my guys done before I put them on the table. I've used the same kind of techniques over the years to smash out armies. You know, I probably do about 4 2,000 point armies a year, and that's just Lord of the Rings. I play loads of other games. So in the next segment, I'll show you how I'm able to smash out armies fast without them looking like complete mints. You know, just an average run-of-the-mill standard. If it's a hero, I'll probably spend a bit more time on, maybe do a bit of freehand. But if it's just rank and file troops, I'm all about getting them on the table as fast as possible. So the first thing I did was give the cloak a layer of storm vermin fur. I also did the axe in a Stormhost silver. I did forget to film it, so I do apologise for that. I then went on to cover all the kind of leather in a coat of XV88. Next step is giving his beard a coat of Mournfang brown. I then use Cadian flesh to do his hands and face. I accidentally got way too much on his face here, so try to avoid doing that. Next up is Null Noil on his cloak and on the axes, just to give it a bit of recessed shading. Next up, my favourite wash, Agrax Earthshade. Just apply this to anything brown, so the leather, the axe handles. Just to save some time, I would normally use Reichland Flesh Tone for the flesh, so you could do that, but I'm just going to cover it in Agrax just to speed things up. I'm not sure why, but my Agrax Earthshade here, it's definitely not a gloss one, but it's dried gloss. This is the second time I've had issues with an Agrax drying gloss, so I'm going to have to go ahead and give this a coat of Stormhost silver just to try and tone it down a bit, because right now it's very, very shiny and it looks absolutely terrible. Next up, get the Mournfang brown out and give the hair a quick dry brush just to bring out the details. Stormhost hasn't completely got rid of the shininess, but we're just going to have to live with it, sadly. I then did an even lighter dry brush of Jacero Orange, just to make him look a bit more gingery. I gave the cloak another coat of Storm Vermin Fur, just to kind of go over where the recessed shading's been a bit too deep. I then mix some white into the Storm Vermin Fur and do an edge highlight, just to make the details pop. I then wanted to tie the Rangers in with the rest of my army. I thought yellow would be a bit too bright for some Rangers, so I just applied some purple to some of the fabric that they have on their models. I then gave this a quick wash of Drukhari Violet, just to, you know, another recessed shade. I also think it makes it look very nice and matte. I then did a highlight of Genestealer Purple on the edges. I should have maybe toned this down a bit with the original Xerus Purple, to make it a little bit darker, but you know, the effect isn't too bad. I then dry brush the base with Bleach Bone, or whatever it's, Screaming Skull, sorry, not Bleach Bone, Screaming Skull. They're still using the old paint names. It's only been a decade since the names changed, but you know, old habits die hard. We're then back to the Moonfang Brown just to give the base a little trim. I don't like the black base. I think that started when Golden Demon entries started doing it and everyone wanted to pretend they were Golden Demon entry winners. You know, each their own. Some people like the black base, but I like my army to kind of blend into the board when I'm playing a game, so it looks more like a real battle rather than a lot of kind of chess pieces sitting on top of some terrain. Then the final thing to do, which is the most important step in this whole process to make your models look good. And right now you can see it looks terrible. It's not a good paint job. It's fast, nasty, just getting it on the table. But when you add some grass tufts and do the base, it just brings the model to life. And it's even better when you add it into a group of other models. So if you're thinking, this looks absolutely terrible, make sure you give it a nice base and then place it in amongst another 10 guys as it would be on a gaming board, and if it looks good then you've done a good job. So things to take away from this is you'll notice I paint directly from the paint pot and only mix paints when I absolutely have to. A lot of people will hate me for this, and you know, I hate myself to be fair, but I want to get stuff on the table as fast as possible and this is how I'm able to do it. I've tried to use wet palettes and stuff in the past, but I find unless I'm doing a hero model, the motivation to paint goes by the time I've set up the palette and mucked about with it, and I feel that sometimes setting up takes longer than actually painting a model itself. Second thing would be the base is absolutely the most important part. Don't judge your model until you're giving it a nice base and put it in amongst some other troops, because your thoughts on it will just change instantly. Third, I use the colour wheel a lot to make sure the colours I use blend well together or contrast nicely. So thank you to the 3 viewers who actually made it to the end of the video. It was my first attempt, so don't be too harsh in the comments. I know my video editing and especially my filming is not the best, considering I'm using a phone from about 10 years ago. But hopefully you enjoyed it, whether that's learning how to paint fast or some history of Middle-earth, or even just looking at some big armies, because we all love big Lord of the Rings armies, don't we? So don't forget to like, subscribe and give my bell a wee ring. I know there's not a lot of first stage stuff on YouTube, so hopefully it's maybe a wee niche that I can fill, as if there's one thing we like here, it's big first stage battles, so we'll be doing that soon as well. And with that, I will leave you with this amazing extract from the Silmarillion, read by the absolutely phenomenal Martin Shaw.
Last of all the eastern force to stand firm were the Dwarves of Belegost, and thus they won renown. For the Naugrim withstood fire more hardily than either elves or men, and it was their custom, moreover, to wear great masks in battle, hideous to look upon, and those stood them in good stead against the dragons. And but for them, Glaurung and his brood would have withered all that was left of the Noldor. But the Naugrim made a circle about him when he assailed them, and even his mighty armor was not foolproof against the blows of their great axes. And when, in his rage, Glaurung turned and struck down Azaghal, lord of Belegost, and crawled over him, with his last stroke, Azaghal drove a knife into his belly, and so wounded him that he fled the field, and the beasts of Angband in dismay followed after him. Then the dwarves raised up the body of Azaghal and bore it away, and with slow steps they walked behind, singing a dirge in deep voices, as it were a funeral pomp in their country, and gave no heed more to their foes, and none dared to stay them.